The Super Takumar lenses have a reputation for being cheap and really good quality, really sharp lenses. I own 3 of them. I have the 35mm 3.5, I have the 28mm 3.5, and I have a 50mm, which I believe is radioactive 1.4. Today I'm going to be looking at the 35mm 3.5 and seeing how it is for stills. I always say that one of the best lenses that I own is this one. This is the 28mm 3.5 Super Takumar lens. I swear by this lens, it's on my camera a lot. I adapted using a M32 EF mount adapter. This lens is always on my camera. I love it. It's perfect. It's really small. It's really light, and optically, I believe it's absolutely fantastic. I own a lot of first and third party lenses for Sony and for Canon and now for Lumix. So L mount, EF mount, and E mount. And this one is as good quality as any of my professional lenses. I use it all the time. The 50mm 1.4 is another lens that I use, not as often because it's not as optically perfect, I don't believe. I think it's quite soft. You get a lot of focus difficulties because it's so soft, and I also find that it's, you know, it's not really a kind of a lens that I can just put on the camera and cover me for everything, whether it's landscapes or portraits or travel and things. I like to have a wider lens to give me a little bit more scope to see what's around me and to be a bit more creative with the photos. And that's where the 35mm 3.5 comes in. This is the latest one that I purchased. I had the other two for a few years before I purchased this one, and I admit I rarely use this one, really because I do just really love the 28mm lens. I love the images that come from it, and I've already done a YouTube video a few years ago talking about that lens where I took it around China with me, so feel free to have a look for that one on my channel. The 35mm lens it's a really versatile lens. It's obviously a good focal length for street photography, and you can also get kind of nice portraits on this, something a bit wider where you can see the subject in the environment. It's a style that I really like, actually. The 35mm is an intriguing one, and it's actually strange that I haven't used it that much at all on my camera. So the last few weeks I have been up in Durham, so the northeast of England, and I decided to take it with me to force myself to use it on the camera, to see what it's like, to see if there's a reason I haven't been using it over the 28mm or the 50mm when I've been out and about, as I've preferred to just go with one of those, usually the 28. And I thought, if I take it with me as the only lens, I have it stuck on my camera, then I'm going to be forced to get creative with it. I'm going to be forced to see how good this lens really is. Is it good wide open? Do you need to stop it down for clarity? And are there any kind of lens effects going on there as a result of kind of imperfections in the lens? I would say that off the bat, I'm really pleased with how the images came out. I did some portrait stuff with my family, and I did some landscape stuff. I'm going to put some images up now so you can have a look for yourself and see what you think about the optical quality. What I would say is that I believe that this lens has a really nice, distinct look. Obviously, at f3.5, it's not the fastest lens in the world. However, I've found that there's actually quite a pleasing amount of depth of field in there on a full frame sensor. I was shooting this on my Sony A7III. I found that actually I was able to get quite a nice depth of field, although as you can see from this image here with my dog, this is about as close focus distance as I could get, and there's not a lot going on as far as background blur and bokeh, but what's there I think is actually quite pleasing. It's actually quite nice to look at. It's quite subtle, and it does draw your attention to the subject whilst retaining some of that background detail, which I quite like. Another aspect of this lens to consider is that it does bloom quite a lot. So when you have a highlight such as a light or the sky or anything along that sort of line, it does bloom quite a lot, and I actually find this to be quite pleasing. It's obviously not going to be practical in every situation and for every type of photography. However, personally, this really does appeal to me. It kind of gives the photo almost film-like quality. I'm saying that I've shot stuff on film before, 35mm film. I've shot cine still film, and I believe that the effects that you get from shooting cine still, the kind of halation around the highlights, it's actually, you get a lot of that just naturally from this. Now, I'm not sure whether it's this particular model whether there's a fluctuation in the quality between the different models, but I would think, you know, there's enough of these produced that there's probably quite a consistent quality. But just judging off this one alone, there's some really nice halation and glow effect. But as you can see from these images, you have really nice glowing areas to the lights, and nothing has been done to these in post-production at all. This is just how they look. And I think it does have a kind of a vintage quality to it. I think if you are trying to replicate this using a model lens, you're going to have to do some fairly extensive post-production work, so applying glows and things. Whereas this is straight out of camera. With these images that you're seeing on screen, I literally just took them out of camera and converted the raw files into JPEG files. There's nothing else going on here, trust me. And I think you'll agree that these are pretty filmic looking images. I'm very pleased with how they turned out. This image was shot at f3.5, so that's wide open, and at a distance and on Instagram and on your phone and all that sort of stuff, it's going to look absolutely fine quality wise. You can see all the detail in there. It's only when you blow it up and getting close, especially out towards the edges, you can see that it does get a little bit soft and there's a little bit of chromatic aberration going on there. Even in the center of the image, you are still getting this bloom, this kind of glare and glow around highlights. Again, this personal preference, I really like this. I think if I want to capture that, it's more in my interest and my personal kind of motivation to go and stick an old lens on the camera and try and achieve this look in camera than it is to stick something like, you know, a Sigma Art 35mm 1.4 on the lens and then try and apply this effect afterwards. It's always going to look better when it's done in camera. Again, here's the same image, but I stopped down to f8. I chose f8 because I was doing a lot of stuff outside and there's a nice big orange marker on the lens. Therefore, I chose f8 to go with these outdoor photography and just to try and see how sharp the lens was. And if you do want to pixel peep, which I'd never really do, but pixel peep in this, f8, you're getting a very sharp image from corner to corner, side to side, center, edges. It's all extremely sharp. And unless you want to be blowing something up to the size of a billboard and sticking it on the side of your house, this is going to be completely fine for any use, I would imagine. The imperfections, so the glows, it's all gone at f8 pretty much. There's still a little bit there, but it's so subtle, it's not going to be a characteristic anymore. Your photo is going to be more clean, it's going to be more clinical, which in a way sucks a little bit of the fun out of the image. However, it also should reassure you that if this is the only lens that you go out with, you are able to capture stunningly sharp images with it. Considering how old this thing is, this is pretty fantastic that you can get such a sharp image for potentially 30-40 pounds or something. I can't remember what I paid for this one exactly, but it's pretty incredible. One kind of problem that I did have with the lens is when you stop it down, so when you change the aperture, it's a lovely smooth aperture, but I'm not sure whether it was just because it was cold. I have actually encountered this problem as well, just, you know, in the house, so not in extreme cold situation, but it was very cold. It was snowy, it was around about 0 degrees Celsius, but the aperture is extremely slow. You can adjust the aperture and then you can physically look in the lens and count 1, 2, 3 before it starts to actually make any difference. It's a strange feeling, and it's obviously quite tricky when you're looking through the viewfinder of the camera. You're adjusting the aperture, you think that you've adjusted it to what it needs to be, and then as you're composing, suddenly the image gets darker because the aperture actually starts to close down. So I found that to be a little bit strange. Again, that might just be this one model. It could also be something to do with the fact that it was pretty cold, but it is something to bear in mind. This is not something that you're going to be using in a rush, I don't think. I think you're going to be controlling shutter speed if you need to get something in a hurry, if you don't want to miss a subject or something that's happening, for example. Another thing to consider with the lens is the close focus distance, or the minimum focus distance. On this lens it is 45 centimeters, which doesn't sound like a lot. It's like half a meter away or something, but it means that because of the wide angle of the lens, you can't really be getting that close to subject. So I did a few photos, as you'll see now, of watches on a table surface, and I was as close as I could possibly get to them. So to give you an idea, there's absolutely no macro capability on this lens at all. If you want to get up close to something, you are going to have to use a different lens, or potentially even mount this one backwards. That sometimes works. One comment to add to that is that at the close focus distance, it still is very sharp. Here is a shot at f3.5. Again, you can see a bit of the bloom. You can see that I've slightly missed focus. I'm sorry about that. But stopping down to f8, you can see that it is ridiculously sharp. If you look at the beautiful hairs on my beautifully hairy arm, you will notice how sharp they are, and the watch itself is extremely clear. So again, you can't get nice and close, but with a bit of cropping if required, if this is going on Instagram or it's just going to be viewed on a phone, you can totally crop into your 24 megapixel, 50 megapixel image, and you've got something very, very sharp and totally usable. But generally, I would not advise this lens if you're looking to do some close-up kind of macro stuff. You might have noticed that the shots changed a little bit. Well, that's because I've now put the lens onto my camera. Now this is a Sony A7III, which is a full frame lens, and it's mounted currently via a M32 to EF adapter, which in turn is mounted to an EF to Sony E adapter. I believe it doesn't affect anything apart from the distance the lens is to the sensor. As you can see, it looks all right. This is, you'll have to forgive the focus a little bit. It's a manual focus lens, obviously, and I've just set it roughly where my face is, but we're wide open at 3.5. This is what it's like for filming. What do you think? It's quite clear. I think it has a nice kind of vignette to it. Just again, a natural imperfection of the lens, but for videography, I think this works really well, and I think the effects and imperfections that you've seen in the stills photography will carry across to the videography as well. There's a lot of imperfections, there's a lot of glow and all that sort of stuff, but presently this is lit how I would say is correct for a YouTube video anyway, and it holds up. It's still quite nice and sharp, and it's totally usable for videography. I mean, tell me if you think any different, but this is, you know, this is on my camera now, so yeah, it can give you an idea if you want to be using this for videography, although I would not recommend it for filming yourself because you are going to drift in and out of focus, obviously. This is to give you an idea of how the lens flares. So obviously there's a little bit of flaring going on as I'm moving the light around. Sometimes it's quite pleasing, sometimes it does just, you know, wash out the image and completely take away any contrast that's in there. But as you can see, it is relatively pleasing. It's not too horrible, and I think, you know, if you've got a light that's just off lens, like here for example, it's going to be casting a little bit of glow into your frame, and it's going to be perhaps lifting the blacks a little bit. But I think overall, from a quick, extremely rough test, this looks pretty good, and I would say that that's quite acceptable. Who do I think this lens is for? If you're considering purchasing one of these lenses, obviously I praise the Super Takumar lenses. I absolutely love the 28mm. If you could only buy one, I would be buying the 28mm. But the 35mm is also a pretty exceptional lens, to be fair. I was pleasantly surprised. I'm not sure why I haven't used this so much in the past. I think I've always defaulted to the 28mm. There's no real reason behind that. I think that the 35mm is just as good. It has a lot of character. Optically, it's not fantastic wide open, but stopping it down even so slightly gives you a really, really sharp image. And wide open with those imperfections, you are going to be achieving quite a nice vintage kind of filmic look. So I think that this is a lens that I'm actually going to take out with me a little bit more. I'm going to leave it in my bag. I don't mind if it gets knocked about because it's solid metal, you know, it's built like a tank, and it's just a nice one to have in the backpack. So I'm actually going to make an effort to have this one with me more often. But that's it for this one. Hopefully you found that semi-interesting and semi-useful. If you're thinking about this lens, let me know if you own one already. What Takumar lenses do you have? What other vintage lenses do you have that are worth a look perhaps? Let me know down in the comments, and if you like this video and you like this kind of informal chat about lenses and photography and filmography, please do give me a subscribe. I'm trying to do as many of these videos as I can at the moment. So yes, look forward to hearing from you in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.